Welcome. This is A Curious Learning Curve, and I'm your host, Jen Gruey. This is a podcast where we talk about higher education and teaching and everything in between. On this season, we're chatting about online education. How do we engage our students in online environments and help to increase our instructor presence? Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome. I'm here today with Bob Mills. Bob Mills is a faculty member in the Huntsman School of Business in the Data Analytics and Information Systems program. Bob, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks, Jen. It's great to be here. These are my old stomping grounds. I did my PhD in a floor above in ITLS back in 2000.
Yeah, so we're in the education building at Utah State University. So, it's kind of fun to go to, sometimes we're in different buildings and brings back different memories. I know for me too. Bob, we're going to jump into, so you and I had a conversation not too long ago where you were talking about this really cool idea, and it was so outside of my my knowledge base and comfort zone. You're doing some really cool things with video, and it almost seems like gaming types of videos.
Part of any type of innovations from our department took place about 6 years ago. We hired a new department head, Chris Corcoran, and he's completely transformed our department. And in our school, you typically would hire an MIS faculty member. Our last faculty members have been from marketing, Mark Dotson out of BYU. We've hired an ITLS instructional technology person as an assistant professor. We've hired econ, finance, and Chris's sole focus is on students, and students come first. And the last 2 University Teachers of the Year have come out of our department, which would be really quite rare. And so the great thing is Chris supports anything related to improving the student experience. And so we do have a center, the ASC, Analytics Solution Center, where students work on real projects with companies. And in the last couple of years, we brought in over $1 million to support that effort from companies paying. And a lot of times the companies will hire the students. And we have other professors doing the Socratic method, how they teach. So we have a lot of different ways of teaching, and Chris supports those. And I was teaching, this would have been a year ago, or about a year and a half ago, and it was the semester that my mom passed away. And
I'm so sorry.
It's been, but not to turn this into a sad podcast,
Sure.
but it was kind of the motivation that semester. I thought, okay, let's make it where everybody in the class gets a B- or better. But as you know, both of my daughters have taken your classes, and they think you're a rock star, which makes this a little scarier experience. And it's also a credit that you manage. You do the USU Connections and the Luminary. If you haven't seen it, if you do a Google search or a YouTube search, it's incredible.
Well, thank you. That's all very complimentary.
Yeah, no, it's like the foundations. But my daughter Maddie claims, she's in her PhD program in clinical psychology under Joanne Shantz. She claims that was her only B in psychology. It was your class, but she still loved you, which is really a compliment. But that semester, I thought everybody needs to earn the B- or better. So I called in the 15 lowest performing students in a class called Database Management, where I teach mostly structured query language. It's the coding language that runs database. And of course, databases are in every company. Everything is built on databases. And I asked them a simple coding question that they'd learned in the class before. So even if they don't learn anything in my class, they would have learned it in the class before. And then in my class, and about 10 of the 15 couldn't answer the question. And you're a psychology professor, it would be similar to you calling in the lowest performing students and asking them about Pavlov's experience. And the bell originally was unconditioned stimulus. And then you describe the whole process, and eventually the bell becomes what?
The conditioned stimulus.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
But if they couldn't answer that, you kind of look in the mirror going, wait, what am I doing? I'm up here teaching this. The top performing students understand it. But the lower performing students, I'm not reaching as I think I am. And my original doctoral chair, David Merrill, he's really well known in the field, kind of a pioneer in instructional technology. But he would often say we try to avoid spray and pray instruction, where we just spray out information and pray some of it sticks. And so it really had me thinking, I'm not connecting with all of these students, or they're forgetting that information. And I have a background in ITLS. My other doctoral chair, Kim Lawless, has been a great inspiration. She's now dean of Penn State. College of Education. So I started looking at different theories that I'd learned in the program, and then I kind of forgot those theories, and I went back just to high school.
Sure.
And sometimes you don't remember even who taught a class. But then there's a few teachers from high school. We had one biology teacher. He passed away. Dr. Kenska passed away maybe 15 years ago. But whenever he would describe something in biology, he would always analogize it or use a metaphor. So every time he would talk about mitochondria, he'd make these big muscles. And he's just, wearing the lab jacket and his little spiky hair. And he'd be like, mito. But I never forgot it. And then every time he would talk about mitosis, he would point to his toe and talk about his toe splitting. And I think, how is it that students are forgetting what I'm teaching in class? And yet I remember something, all the way back to, high school. And so I started to think of possibility of different modalities of teaching. And so all of you out there teach different subject matter. And most of the time we lecture and demonstrate. Then we have some examples and some practice opportunities, which is fine. And that actually represents Merrill's, complete instruction called his first principles. But he also has something called secondary presentation forms, where when possible, if you can provide a different modality of learning, that would be even better.
Sure. It sounds a little bit like that universal design kind of concept, which has really become a lot more popular in online spaces and other kinds of teaching and educational spaces.
Yes. And the leading educational psychologist in the world, his name is Richard Mayer. He's out of the University of Santa Barbara, California at Santa Barbara. So I spent a day with him during the summer learning more about his cognitive multimedia theory. And his theory has about 14 principles. And I'd love to be able to go replicate some of these studies, because one of his findings is students learn better from authentic voices than they do from a professor's voice. You'd love to look at the data, right, to see if that holds true. But he also finds that the use of visuals along with speech is better than simply reading, a page. So he has all of these different theories, and it gave me the idea of the possibility of using a different modality in the form of just instructional animations.
Interesting. So this is the part where you've shown me some of these videos, and they're, as I said before, they feel like a game. It feels more engaging and more fun. And I would imagine your online learners receive that pretty well.
Yeah. And sometimes you'll get an email that'll say, thanks so much for the animation. I learned from it. And you're really happy. And then they'll say, because I didn't learn much from your lecture or something. And you're going, okay, so kind of thanks. But it is true. You think of animations, even Rudolph or something, you could probably go through almost the entire animation and memorize, or the video, I guess, a cartoon, and remember all of it. And so I started to put together, the first one was the one where the students had the problem with it. And the initial idea for the animations, using Mayer's theories, personalization, I won't go through all the details, but if you have a chance, it's really a great structure. So they're not just based on random cartoons, they're based on a theory.
Which I love. I love that we're talking about evidence-based teaching strategies.
Right.
This is not just coming out of Bob your head, which I'm sure there's wonderful, amazing ideas that come out of there, but that we're utilizing that back to research those theories.
Yes. And one of the principles, he has a coherence principle. And this principle is that you don't want a lot of distractions from what you're trying to teach. And that is a problem with the animations, because you want this storyline, and then you want to show the code, and is it a distraction? And so there are things where it could be problematic using the animations. But we put the animations together, and at this point we have about 16 animations. And it's been a bit of an evolution. So originally the animations, like this group by, think of the Pavlov, learning about the bell being a conditioned stimulus. But the original one was kind of a standalone. So you learn about group by in class and aggregate functions, and then you can watch the animation later. And in my advanced database class, I'm trying to introduce all of these animations just as a test run. So I'm sure the novelty effect is probably worn off. They're probably tired of all these animations, but just to see how they go. And so we started with standalone animations. And then in the class, if you're going to use it in class or even in a live online class, rather than having just a standalone, I started to try to build the animation into the topic that we're teaching. So I might cover a topic on data fraud, and then I start a video. And what's cool about these animations is one of them is based on life on Earth as a simulation. And we have two characters, Randy and Sandy, from a planet Selecta, and they control Earth based on writing SQL code. And so on this particular one with data fraud, they're interacting with the students. They're saying, look, we need to find out bank fraud in Utah. And we look at Provo, Orem, Salt Lake, and Logan. And I have a clip that I can play along with this. But in the video, we're trying to figure out the fraud. And so initially, we're just doing some aggregate functions, doing some just basic statistics to get the descriptives. And then they would have, Randy and Sandy would have you stop the video. And then the students in class would write the code. And once the code is finished, then we would start the video again, and they would progressively go on to the more difficult topic. And so on the next one, we might use a pivot table in order to look a little bit deeper into the data. And eventually on that one, we use Benford's law.
Some of this kind of goes a little bit over my psychology head, but I think one of the points that is really important for our listeners to know is that, I mean, you're talking about something very specific to your field and some really specific content, which is so cool. But people outside of this field, could they use this animation in their own classes?
Yes. So in this one, what I'm trying to say is we start with just really simple coding solutions, and then we move on to progressively more difficult, where we're using Benford's law to find out which of the different cities is got fraud, potential fraud. And so at the end, we find out, of course, it's a big surprise, but Provo is kind of the possibility. It doesn't mean that, right, it doesn't mean fraud, but it's a possibility. But one thing about the animations is you can include your personality and your humor in all of these animations. So for instance, when my daughter was getting married, my older daughter, Megan, we were standing and waiting to walk, and the music started playing, and we're just standing there, and I turned to her and I said, let's do this. And so in every animation, it's not necessarily funny, but I have let's do this somewhere in the animation.
Should we head to Provo and check out the situation?
Let's do this. Just kidding. No, let's send our coworker from Earth, Dr. Kelly. I've been to Provo once before, and I hope to keep it that way.
I agree. Go Aggies!
So you can insert your own type of humor. So the one type would be a standalone. That would be like the group buy that I did. The other would be more of that interactivity. So by the time class is over, you've gone through the video, paused it a number of times, and students have a chance to practice. And then another type that we have of animations is just to help review for the exams. And typically those have been really well received when they're in kind of a game show style. And I can play some of those as well. And then we kind of fell upon another one that may be the most valuable of all of these animations. And then I'll describe how you could build these on your own. If you have a project, you typically give them a list of rules. So these are the rules, these are the constraints, these are the deliverables, and you read them. And so what we've decided to do is for each of these projects, instead of giving them that paper with the list, we're going to record the animation, which provides all of that detail. So the one that we did in my class was based on an SQL internship. So the student in the video, looks at this application or job announcement for all the skills that he needs, and then he goes and meets with the professor. And during the professor's interaction, they learn all of the rules, requirements, guidelines, constraints for the project. And so that follows Mayer's guidelines a little bit too, is where you can bring something from just written format and bring it alive with the use of animations.
That's awesome. That sounds amazing. And it sounds like if anybody is using something where they're trying to show a process, they're trying to practice certain skills, they're trying to practice having students apply information, they could utilize this animation. So let's say I am not even close to being in your field, don't have your same experience, your same knowledge. How would someone go about trying to create some animation on their own?
That's a great question. So what's interesting about this project, and sometimes I laugh because we have an AI component to it where it embeds AI into Canvas, and we have all these other fancy features. But my favorite part is write the script and build the animation. And we do have some cases where students now are writing part of the script, and I pick the top ones and they go into the animation. But a lot of times AI has changed how we teach, how students learn. There's a debate on how much you can use and how much would be too much, and that's all part of the debate. But what's interesting is this idea would have been impractical before AI. because we've done about 16 animations. And what's great is I wrote the first script completely using the group by, again, like the Pavlov situation. But then I can upload that script into AI. I use ChatGPT, and I can say, here's another topic that I'm interested in doing. So we've done Pavlov, now we want to do Skinner box or something. And can you give me some ideas for themes? And it will give you a list of themes that would lend itself to the topic that you're teaching. And some of them are very close related. So you're teaching something and you're using industry, warehouses, purchasing products, selling projects, really close to, and then some of them are based on a wizard theme, or again, Randy and Sandy on Planet Selecta. So you can kind of decide how close to the situation you want to be or how far away that you want to be. And so after the third or fourth script, what's so interesting is I have one professor, Dr. Fidel, and he's been my nemesis my whole career because he's perfect, right? Everything he does is perfect. His hair is perfect. He publishes in the best journals. He's the best teacher. He's best at everything. And so I put him in all the videos, and he loses most of the time, right? Dr. Fidel, Dr. Kelly, we call him, so we don't use his last name. He loses most of the time. But what's so interesting is now after I've uploaded 3 or 4 scripts into ChatGPT, if I'm doing another topic, so now I'm doing stored procedures, and I ask it to come up with some ideas, it may say in scene 3, Dr. Kelly makes a cameo. And you're just reading this going, it knows exactly what I kind of like to do. And then once it writes the scripts, I just go in and change it a little bit. For instance, in every one, I would say, let's do this somewhere. Not necessarily funny, but just it means something to me. And so if you're an educator and you're thinking, I usually just record my narrated PowerPoint slides, you can ask yourself, why not push it to the next level? You're going to have a project. Why not take the project from a written piece of paper to a fully immersive group of animations, having AI do most of the script? And then once you have the script, the question is, well, how do we build it? Well, there's programs like Vyond, and they are expensive. They're about $90 a month. But Vyond now has fully AI capability to recreate scripts. So AI can help build the script. AI can create the animation, and then you can decide whether it's standalone, whether you use it interactively with the students, or whether you're using it to set up a project. For instance, we have a Hack USU, and we do that every year. Last year, we had about 600 students from all throughout the state, high school and college students, where they come and compete. And up until now, it grows every year, but up until now, the projects are all paper-based. So they read the project, read the constraints, and Chelsea Harding does such a great job for our department. But the question is there something we can do on the margins to make it just a little better? And so this year, we hope to introduce the animations where if we're working with a project with NASA and Space Dynamics, we could have the space theme, and they could say, I'm such and such from NASA, and here's our problem that we have, and we need to have a dashboard to help solve this. And then they could interview somebody else who works at the plant, and these are the things that I would like to see in the dashboard or whatever we're building. And so instead of just reading it, we can hopefully bring it to life and make that Hack USU just a little better using AI to help build the scripts and implementing them for the students. So they may leave thinking, wow, this was a little better than last year, all because of the animations.
I love that. And I love that idea.
We did collect data in our intro class using, I mentioned you could use a narrated PowerPoint, and we use that as a baseline because that's what a lot of professors do. And then we used an animation for a topic that was covered. And we had about 125 students that went through the project, and statistically significant, they thought the animation was more relevant than the narrated PowerPoints. They were more satisfied with it. We also asked about cognitive load, going back to Mayer's coherence. Is this starting to confuse you with all the other things going on? They disagreed with that. And on the assessment, the students in the animation scored about 12% higher than the narrated PowerPoint. And there may be a lot of reasons for that, but I think one would be just it's something new, it's something different. And so rather than double speeding like a lot of our students do, they probably took time to watch the entire animation. So that's been great.
I think for our audience, there's been a lot of things that I have learned today. I've learned about this animation. I've learned about how we can engage our students in fun and interesting and more novel ways, and how that piques their interest. And it seems like helps them to engage in the content for longer and maybe even more in depth, which is really cool. It sounds like if you are doing anything where you want to have your students apply something, go through a process, practice something, you can create these animations. AI sounds like the way to go with the script and how much support you can get with AI. And then there's programs that can create this animation.
Yeah.
So,
and maybe one of the differences is typically we look at AI and how students use it to learn. And in this case, I think we're looking through the lens of how can we as instructors use it as a different teaching modality to improve the classroom experience. I think so. It's just looking at AI in a little bit different way.
well, I love that. And thank you so much for being here. And thank you to our audience for listening and watching this video. Thank you.
You've heard the ideas. Now it's time to see them in action. Our guests just stepped out of the podcast studio and directly into an instructional simulation. Hold on, things are about to get animated. Hey Sandy, has Jen from Earth ever been in one of our simulations?
I don't think so. Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
Let's do this. Initiating podcastimmersion.exe.
Wow, this is wild. Before AI, creating something like this would have taken weeks. Now I'm literally in my first simulation.
Jen, you still sound the same. I love how we can take topics that students struggle with or concepts that are challenging to teach and have AI help us create a well-thought-out instructional animation.
As a psychologist, I can't help but wonder if combining visuals, dialogue, and interaction like this boosts long-term memory retention.
Exactly. I still remember my high school biology teacher, Mr. Kenska, flexing his bicep every time he said mitochondria, but I don't remember a single slide deck from that year.
Hi, Jen. You do such a great job with USU Connections and Luminary.
Hey, Fidel, this isn't your podcast. I think yours might be in a few weeks.
That's right. I'll catch you all later. Have fun.
I love the idea of using AI to innovate online teaching. Your instructional animations are such a creative way to reach students.
Hey, Jen, earlier in the podcast, I mentioned an email from a student. Here's what it said. I watched the group buy video and just wanted to let you know it was so helpful. I didn't really get it from the lectures, but after watching the video, it makes sense now.
That's a nice compliment about your animations and about your lecture. Let's just say that's a nice compliment about your animations.
Hey, Maddie, do you remember Dr. Gruey?
Of course. Hi, Dr. Jen. Your class was awesome, though it was my only B.
Maddie, that's fantastic. A B on Earth is the same as an A on Planet Selecta.
It's true. Dr. Gruey is a great professor, so we count a B grade on Earth as an A grade on Planet Selecta.
That's great, because I had a student earn a B once too. The student never attended class, didn't take any exams, and didn't submit any coding projects.
And that's why we don't accept transfer credit from Dr. Mills classes, only Dr. Gruey. That's it for today. I think it's great that these professors are dedicated to improving the classroom experience. I'm excited to watch the next podcast with Jen to learn additional strategies we can use to increase performance and motivation to learn. I know students appreciate the extra effort.